Hi, today I will be reading chapter 3 from It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine. And chapter 3 is called It's Not You, It's Us. Our models of grief are broken. When someone you love has just died, why does it matter that our cultural models of grief are broken? I mean, who cares? This is about you, not everyone else. Except that, especially in early grief, everyone thinks you're doing it wrong. The reflection you get from the outside world can make you think you've gone crazy on top of everything else. The dismissals, the platitude of others can make you feel abandoned inside your grief, just at the moment when you most need to know you're loved. Just at the moment when you most need to know you're loved. Just at the moment when you most need to know you're loved. Your personal experience is affected intimately by the wider cultural sweep of grief illiteracy. Seeing the illiteracy laid out can help normalize a wholly abnormal time. You aren't crazy. The culture is crazy. It's not you, it's us. There's a quote here by Walt Whitman from Leaves of Grass. Re-examine all you have been told in school or church or in any book and dismiss whatever insults your own soul. The trickle-down pathology. Collectively, we wear a massive set of reality blinders when it comes to grief. Clinical counseling training programs devote very little time to the subject, even though most clients will come to us with immense grief. What is taught is a hugely outdated system of stages that was never meant to prescribe the correct ways to grieve. What is taught to the medical professions trickles down to the general population. As a culture, our views on grief are almost entirely negative. Grief is seen as an aberration, a detour from normal, happy life. Our medical models call it a disorder. We believe that grief is a short-term response to a difficult situation and, as such, should be over and done with within a few weeks. Grief that hasn't disappeared, faded back into fond memories, and an occasional wistful smile is evidence that you've done something wrong, or that you aren't as resilient, skilled, or healthy as you thought you were before. Sadness, grief, pain, they all mean there's something wrong with you. You're stuck in the so-called dark emotions. You aren't following stages of grief. You're blocking your own recovery, still being so sad. You have a condition now and it needs to be fixed. When grief is spoken of in a more positive term, it always means when grief is spoken of in more positive terms, it's always as a means to an end. Our popular psychology, self-help books, movie storylines, book plots, and spiritual texts all glorify grief and loss as a way to grow as a person. To transcend loss is the biggest goal. Happiness is considered the true mark of wellness. Your health and sanity depend on your ability to rise above your grief, to claim equanimity, to find your happiness within. Your broken heart doesn't stand much of a chance in the face of all this. There's no room for your pain to just exist without pathology. The anti-grief narrative and the bizarre things we hear. In my own early days, I heard unimaginable things about my grief, about my skills in dealing with grief, and about Matt himself. I was told that I wasn't a very good feminist if I was this upset over losing a man. I was told that my personal and spiritual development must not have been as good as I thought if I couldn't find the gift in this situation. I also heard that Matt never loved me, that he was happier, free from his body, than he ever could have been while alive, that he would be horrified at how badly I was doing. I was told that Matt and I created this with our intentions, that we had a contract on his life. We agreed to this, and since we agreed, there was no reason to be upset. I also heard seemingly wonderful things, that I was strong and smart and beautiful, that I would find someone new right away, that I wouldn't turn this loss around and make it into a gift. That I would turn this loss around and make it into a gift, that I should think of all the people I could help, that if I would stop being so sad, I'd feel his love around me, but only if I stopped being so sad. Anything to get me out of my pain and sadness and back into a more acceptable way of being. The things I was told pale in comparison to stories I've heard from grieving people around the world. You caused your baby's cancer with your unhealed personal issues. You have 2 other children. You should be thankful they exist. If it was meant to be, she would have lived. It's God's plan. You really need to get over this and move on. They weren't that great of a person anyway. A truly enlightened person is not this attached to another. A truly enlightened person is not this attached to the other humans in their life. Clearly, you're codependent. You must have called this experience to yourself with your thoughts. You needed it for your own learning. So what if you're paralyzed? Some people never get a chance to see what they're really made of, and you do. Judgment, criticism, and dismissive comments are the norm in deep grief, not the exception. Sure, most people have good intentions, but the difference between their intentions and the actual impact of their words is vast. The thing is, people think the whole point of grief is to get out of it as quickly as possible, as if grief were some strange thing, some bizarre and incorrect response to someone or something you love being torn from your life. Grief gets a narrow window to be expressed. After that, you are expected to return to normal, carrying with you the gifts you've learned from the experience. You're supposed to become wiser, more compassionate, and truly understand what's important. Staying sad means you're not doing it right. Our cultural ideas are so deeply embedded that it can be hard to describe how it feels to be on the receiving end of what passes for grief support. We'll get into this more deeply in part 3, but it's important to state here that most people simply stop saying how misunderstood they feel in their grief because it seems no one wants to hear it. We stop saying this hurts because no one listens. Getting stuck in grief. I'm often asked what to do when my friend or family member seems to be stuck in their grief. My response is always the same. What would not being stuck look like to you? What are your expectations? For most people, not being stuck means that the person has gone back to work, regained their sense of humor, attends social events, doesn't cry every day, and is able to talk about things other than the loss of their grief, other than their loss or their grief. They seem happy again. We think happy is the equivalent of healthy, as though happiness were the baseline, the norm to which all things settle when we're living as we should. In short, back to normal is the opposite of being stuck, and getting back to normal, happy, has to happen fast. How long is too long? I remember telling someone I was having a rough day about 5 weeks after my partner drowned. Why? What's going on? They asked. Matt died, I replied. Still? That's still bothering you? Still? Yes. 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years. One of the best things someone said to me in the months after Matt died was that with a loss of this magnitude, just happened could mean 8 days ago as easily as it means 80 years. When I speak to someone within the first 2 years of their loss, I always tell them, this just happened. It was just a minute ago. Of course it still hurts. Their relief is palpable. We have it so deeply ingrained in us that any kind of hardship shouldn't last more than a couple of months at most. Anything more than that is considered malingering, as though the loss of someone you love were just a temporary inconvenience, something minor, and surely not something to stay upset over. Our medical model calls grief that lasts longer than 6 months a disorder. Descriptions of so-called complicated grief, grief requiring psychological intervention, include still longing for the person who has died, feelings of injustice, and a pervasive sense that the world can never go back to what it was, and other forms of so-called hopelessness. In real life experience, that timeline of expectation is actually far shorter. Many clinicians, clergy, and therapists believe that being deeply affected by loss after the first couple of weeks is a faulty response. What the medical models believe move out to the general population, perpetuating the idea that you should be back to normal as soon as possible. Medicalizing and pathologizing a healthy, normal, sane response to loss is ridiculous, and it does no one any good. The stages of grief and why therapists fail. As a therapist, I often find myself apologizing for my profession. With alarming frequency, I hear horror stories from grieving people who have gone to see therapists for support only to leave shaken and angry. Grief is routinely dismissed, judged, medicated, and minimized by those in the helping professions. No matter their theoretical orientation to therapy or their intent to help, clinicians are often the least skilled people in the room. Many grieving people find themselves educating their therapists about the realities of grief. As I mentioned, our professionals are largely taught the 5 stages of grief model proposed by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her book on death and dying, published in 1969. Even if the 5 stages are not explicitly mentioned, they underline so much of what counselors and doctors think of as the healthy way to grieve. No wonder so many grieving people have given up on getting professional support. The stages don't fit. The stages of grief were developed by Kubler-Ross as she listened to and observed people living with terminal diagnoses. What began as a way to understand the emotions of the dying became a way to strategize grief. The griever is expected to move through a series of clearly delineated stages: denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, eventually arriving at acceptance, at which time their grief work is complete. This widespread interpretation of the stages model suggests that there is a right way and a wrong way to grieve, that there is an orderly and predictable pattern that everyone will go through. You must move through these stages completely or you will never heal. Getting out of your grief is the goal. You have to do it correctly, and if you have to do it fast. If you don't progress correctly, you are failing at grief. In her later years, Kubler-Ross wrote that she regretted writing the stages the way that she did, that people mistook them as being both linear and universal. The stages of grief were not meant to tell anyone what to feel and when exactly they should feel it. They were meant to dictate whether you are doing your grief. They were not meant to dictate whether you are doing your grief correctly or not. Her stages, whether applied to the dying or those left living, were meant to normalize and validate what someone might experience in the swirl of insanity that is loss and death and grief. They were meant to give comfort, not create a cage. Death and its aftermath is such a painful and disorienting time. I understand why people, both the griever and those around them, whether personal or professional, want some kind of roadmap and a clearly delineated set of steps or stages that will guarantee a successful end to the pain of grief. But you can't force an order on pain. You can't make grief tidy or predictable. Grief is as individual as love. Every life, every path is unique. There's no pattern, there's no linear progression. Despite what many experts believe, there are no stages of grief. Despite what the wider population believes, there are no stages of grief. To do grief well depends solely on individual experience. It means listening to your own reality. It means acknowledging pain and love and loss. It means allowing the truth of these things the space to exist without any artificial tethers or stages of requirements. You might experience many of the things other grieving people experience, and hearing that can help, but comparing one way of living with loss with another as though it were a pass-fail endeavor, that's never going to help. Until our medical professionals are taught to come to grief with the respect and care it deserves, it's going to be hard to find therapists who are willing to sit with pain without pathologizing it. So again, on behalf of my profession, I'm sorry it's so rough out there. There are, in fact, many, many beautifully skilled therapists and doctors. I found them for myself in my own early grief, and I've met many of them as I continue to do this work. If you've looked for professional support and been disappointed, please keep looking. Good people are out there. And check the resources section at the back of the book for national and regional resources. It's a great place to start. And here's a quote from Beverly Ward, writing your grief student on the death of her partner. According to some clinical diagnostic criteria, I am suffering from moderate to severe depression and my anxiety levels are high. My therapist suggests antidepressants and some online cognitive behavioral therapy. I leave feeling worse than when I went in. I'm not just grieving anymore. I'm now mentally ill. Someone in some central NHS office has created a downloadable test that tells me so. It must be true. I'm failing grief. I try not to let it get to me, but I wonder again if I should be over this by now. I have passed the 6-month milestone after all. Butterflies, rainbows, and the culture of transformation. A lot goes into the making of grief illiterate culture. There's so much behind all those simplistic and innocuous seeming platitudes. We've already talked about the solution-oriented messages behind most of what people say and think about grief, but the roots of our anti-grief culture run deep. The trickle-down effect of the stages of grief model is just the beginning. Any quick search on the terms grief or hardship will turn out hundreds of thousands of rainbow-bearing positive attitude, this too shall pass memes. We acknowledge that hard things happen, sure, but with hard work and the right attitude, everything will turn out great. After all, our movies and books about grief always show the widower or the grieving mother coming back even better than before. If things seem a little sad or bittersweet sometimes, it's okay, because at least now our hero knows what's really important. That grieving parent Excuse me. You sense the sarcasm, right? Okay. Or the parody. That grieving parent created something beautiful out of their child's death, and just think, it wouldn't have happened otherwise. That terrible near death accident didn't result in death. In fact, it brought the whole family closer together. Things always work out for the best. Part of our strange cultural relationship with grief comes from a seemingly innocent source: entertainment. All of our cultural stories are stories of transformation. They're stories of redemption, books, movies, documentaries, children's stories, even the tales we tell ourselves. They all end on a positive note. We demand a happy ending. If there isn't one, well, that's the hero's fault. Nobody wants to read a book where the main character is still in pain at the end. We believe in fairy tales and Cinderella stories, stories where through effort and perseverance, things always work out. We rise to meet adversity head on. We don't let our troubles get us down, or at least we don't let them keep us there. Our heroes, whether real or fictional, are models of bravery and courage in the face of pain. The villains, the disappointing characters, are the ones too stubborn to turn their pain around. We are an overcoming culture. Bad things happen, but we become better for them. We come out better for them. These are the stories we tell, and it's not just on the screen. Social scientist Brené Brown argues that we live in a gilded age of failure where we fetishize recovery stories for their redemptive ending, glossing over the darkness and struggle that precedes it. We've got a culture narrative that says bad things happen in order to help you grow. And no matter how bleak it seems, the end result is always worth the struggle. You'll get there if only you believe. That happy ending is going to be glorious. Grieving people are met with impatience precisely because they are failing the cultural storyline of overcoming adversity. If you don't transform, if you don't find something beautiful inside this, you failed. And if you don't do it quickly, following that narrative arc from incident to transformation within our collective attention span, you're not living the right story. There's a gag order on telling the truth in real life and in our fictional accounts. As a culture, we don't want to hear that there are things that can't be fixed. As a culture, we don't want to hear that there are some pain that never gets redeemed. Some things we learn to live with, and that's not the same as everything working out in the end. No matter how many rainbows and butterflies you stick into the narrative, some stories just don't work out. Narrative resistance. Without always knowing why, many people rebel against those transformation stories, or at least we're beginning to rebel against them. Those easy, tacked-on endings are starting to very slowly lose favor. Honestly, I think this is why the Harry Potter books were so wildly successful. They were dark. J.K. Rowling dove into the darkness that never once making it syrupy or pretty or sweet. Things did not turn out okay in the end, even though there was beauty in the end. Loss, pain, and grief all existed in the world, and they were never redeemed. They were carried. Rowling's world spoke to us collectively because we needed a story that sounded more like us. Stories are powerful. Throughout human history, mythology, origin stories, and fairy tales gave us images to live into, to pattern our lives after, to learn from. They helped us locate our own experience against the backdrop of something wider. They still do. We still need stories. We're hungry for a new cultural narrative, one that actually matches the way we live, one that matches the inside of our hearts more than it matches some made for TV movie. If we're going to change things, if we're going to create new, valid, realistic, and useful storylines to live into, we have to start by refusing the happy ending. Or maybe by redefining what a happy ending is. A happy ending inside grief like yours cannot be a simple everything worked out for the best. That ending isn't even possible. The new hero's tale. When Matt died, I went looking for stories of people who had lived this kind of loss. I went looking for stories of people living in pain so huge it obliterated everything else. I needed those stories, an example to live into. What I found were stories of how to get out of pain, how to fix it, how to transform grief as soon as possible. I read over and over that there was something wrong with me for being so upset. It wasn't just the books that told me that. The people in my life, close friends, the wider community and therapists, they all wanted me to be okay. They needed me to be okay. Because pain like mine, like yours, is incredibly hard to witness. Our stories are very hard to hear. It wasn't their fault, not really. They didn't know how to listen. But this is what happens when we only tell stories of how pain can be redeemed. We're left with no stories that tell us how to live in it. We have no stories of how to bear witness. We don't talk about pain that can be fixed. We're not allowed to talk about it. We don't talk about pain that can't be fixed. We're not allowed to talk about it. We don't need new tools for how to get out of grief. What we need are skills to withstand it in ourselves and in others. Collectively, we carry an immense backlog of grief that has never been heard simply because we have no story that helps us hear it. We need to tell new stories. We need new stories that tell the truth about pain, about love, about life. We need new stories of bravery in the face of what cannot be fixed. We need to do this for each other. We need to do this with each other because pain happens, grief happens. If we truly want to be helpful to people in pain, we need to be willing to reject the dominant story of pain as an aberrant condition in need of transformation or redemption. We need to stop trotting out the stages of grief that were never meant to become universal scripts. In telling better stories, we weave a culture that knows how to bear witness, to simply show up and be present with that which can never be transformed. In telling better stories, we learn to be better companions to ourselves and to each other. Pain is not always redeemed in the end or otherwise. Being brave, being a hero, is not about overcoming what hurts or turning it into a gift. Being brave is about walking the face. Being brave is about waking to face each day when you would rather just stop waking up. Being brave is staying present in your own heart when that heart is shattered into a million different pieces and can never be made right. Being brave is standing at the edge of the abyss that just opened in someone's life and not turning away from it, not covering your discomfort with pithy, think positive emoticon. Being brave is letting pain unfurl and take up all the space it needs. Being brave is telling that story. It's terrifying and it's beautiful. Those stories, those are the stories we need. The last part of this chapter says there's even more to the story. We've covered a lot of cultural territory in this chapter. That wider lens can help you feel more normal and less crazy inside your grief. It can also help you as you search for professional and personal support in your grief. Identifying those who don't necessarily adhere to the stages model or the cultural narrative of transformation is a great starting point. If you want to dive deeper into our collective avoidance of pain and the far reaching and surprising roots of grief shaming, head over to chapter 4. If it feels like too much for right now, early grief really does that with your ability to take in information. Go right to chapter 5. There, you'll find the new vision of grief, support, and what living your grief well might look like. Again, this is chapter 3 from It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine. Thank you.